One of the most important tools in my studio is a Stampin Sponge. This is a really simple and inexpensive item that can make a huge difference in your projects. So today I want to show you a few ways that I use sponges to help dress up my cards. First of all, they come as this rather large sponge, and this is the size that I like to use because I can hold it easier and maneuver it the way I want. This one's just too big the way it is. So in order to get that smaller sponge, I'm just going to cut this in 8 pieces. So I cut it in half, cut it in half again. Now if you like this size, you can use it. I like to take it down one more time. This is 1/8 of that big sponge, and for me it's the perfect size for my hand. The first thing that I like to do with sponges is to sponge the edge of layers to accentuate them. Here's a vintage card. I use it a lot with vintage style projects. You can just see that it helps define each layer. And here's one that the sponging is a little more subtle. It blends in very nicely, but I've sponged each of these panels as well as the butterfly. And without the sponging on the butterfly, it really didn't stand out very well against the background. But you add just a little sponging and things pop. Next, I'm going to show you how to sponge edges of things. This is the background designer series paper that I'm going to use. I've distressed the edges lightly, and I'm going to take some early espresso. This is going to sit on early espresso base, so I'm going to take some of the same color and sponge the edges. Now what it's important to see is that I'm sponging perpendicular to the surface of the paper rather than doing this, which I use other times for another effect, which sponges both the edge and the top of the paper. All I want on this piece is to accentuate the edges. So you can see how nicely that frames that piece of paper. And then when I put it on the early espresso base, it really kind of helps blend it in to the background. The next thing I'm going to show you is a really simple way to give a little texture to an otherwise plain looking image piece. So this is a piece I did using Simply Soft, which is a 2-step stamp. The colors are very light on it, and I want to give it a sense of just a little more texture, almost like there's stuff flying around in the air around this little garden scene. So I'm going to take a very light color. I'm going to use Wisteria Wonder, which is the same color as these flowers here. And I'm just going to lightly kind of splotch. Now, you don't want to end up with that kind of splotch. This is going to be just subtle. Now, another thing I like to do is use it to help accentuate some embossing or scoring that I've done, like on this card. I used some Perfect Plum ink to sponge the embossing on the Wisteria Wonder cardstock to match the Emboss Resist sponging I did on the flower here. And you can see how just going over the embossing with the sponge will really make it stand out. And give even more texture to the card. So on this one I used a slightly darker color ink than the cardstock I was using. And then on this piece that I had scored, I used Baja Breeze cardstock and sponged it with Baja Breeze ink, which is called Tone on Tone. You can see how that really makes the score lines stand out. Then if I put a focal point in the center, the sponging really sets it off. Another thing that's very effective is to take an intricate design like the vintage wallpaper embossing folder and sponge tone on tone with the same color ink as the cardstock. And it will really make that design pop. And you've got a lovely background that does look very much like sort of a flocked vintage wallpaper. So those are some of my favorite sponging techniques that give my cards a little more depth and texture than without the sponging. I hope you'll try these sponging techniques on your projects and have fun experimenting with them. For more inspiration and instruction, be sure to visit me on my website at www.stampingmadly.com and the Stamping Madly Facebook page. Happy stamping!